the member for Mitchell has the call.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to strongly support the motion of the Parliament in relation to Israel and the unconscionable attacks of the terrorist group Hamas on the people of Israel. And it's very unfortunate that we have heard so much in this debate, whether it be from the Greens or members of the Teal political party, highlighting another side of the case, because when you consider that this is the attack of terror groups against a nation-state targeted at civilians, I don't believe there are two sides to this particular issue that we are facing as a parliament. There is only one. And so it was good to see the unity of this parliament in relation to all members strongly condemning terrorist violence. There is no equivalency between a nation-state like Israel, which has a right to exist, which has a right to defend itself, and the actions of terror groups deliberately targeting civilians, deliberately killing Jewish people for the great crime of simply being Jewish. And when we look through the record of history and we examine the record of humanity, it's no doubt one of the saddest features will be one of the greatest stains on the soul of humanity will be anti-Semitism. It has been more durable than it should be. It has lasted longer, it has killed more people, it has done more damage, and it remains today a completely irrational strain of thinking that tragically for the Jewish people continues to dominate a large part of the world's thinking. And when you consider the motivation of terror groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and their backers in Iran, they simply want to wipe out the existence of Israel and the Jewish people altogether. There can be no peace with groups that have that as their objective. It's naive to suggest that there can. I know people here want to say we can have peace in a peaceful country like Australia, in a Western liberal democracy which is based on rights and the rule of law. We sometimes consider that we can simply call for peace and that will somehow help. We can't have peace with people whose objective is the murder of people for their race or for their characteristics or for their religion or for their background. These terror groups simply don't want peace. And these actions demonstrate that they don't want peace because they were targeted at stopping a major Arab state in Saudi Arabia, a major Muslim state, from normalising relations with Israel, and sadly and tragically has probably delayed and put off what would have been a major advance in a step towards peace and stability for Jewish people and the entire Middle East region. So in a sense, we're here today because of this evil and violence against Jewish people. We're also here, depressingly, to acknowledge that the actions of this group have set back the cause of peace, and that's why we shouldn't equivocate about our response or our condemnation in relation to terror groups who are striking with a greater purpose, not simply the killing of people and the creating of chaos and the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people, but they are preventing other actors in the world today, like Saudi Arabia and others, from moving down a path of peace. An inherently evil act to prevent peace and to take steps to deliberately destroy a more peaceful process in a more peaceful world. And so it was depressing and distressing as well to see an outbreak on the streets of the town where I've grown up and the city that I'm very proud of, Sydney. And I want to say to the Jewish community of Sydney in particular that the group of thugs that presented themselves on the streets of Sydney, that chanted those evil and insidious chants, do not represent all of the Australian population's view about Hamas, Hezbollah and the conflict that they are going through. In fact, it is the obligation of the New South Wales Police, and I call upon the New South Wales Police Minister to get across her brief and do her job. It is unacceptable for the response of the New South Wales State Government to arrest peaceful Jewish, Israeli, Australian citizens while they were attempting to support their parent country peacefully on the streets, but enable and allow and protect thugs on the streets calling for the execution, killing and racial vilification of other Australians. Simply unacceptable. It shouldn't be allowed on our streets. And when you consider what's been happening in Australia in recent times, we do need our police forces to do more, and we do need our security forces to do their jobs. Our security services need to do their jobs. In Melbourne, we have had scenes replicated on multiple occasions now of Nazis on the streets of Melbourne, Australian Nazis, throwing salutes, Nazi salutes. And this was replicated just the other day, masked men on trains throwing Nazi salutes. Now, this should not be happening, not just to the Australian Jewish community. My own family fled from Greece after World War II as a result of a Nazi massacre. I'm only standing here because of the massacre of civilians in Greece by Nazis. And yet in Australia in 2023, we are now not only witnessing Nazis on the streets of Melbourne, and we need our police and our security services to do better, but also our streets in Sydney being taken over by a group of Hamas-supporting thugs directly threatening and inciting racial and religious violence against other Australian citizens. So while I hear the call of Mike Burgess from ASIO, and I understand his point very, very well, I also say to our agencies who have been given multiple tranches of powers by this parliament under multiple tranches of security legislation, also your responsibility is to do your job. You might ask for politicians to calm their rhetoric, sure, but we would also ask you to use the powers the parliament have given you, use the multiple agencies that are under your control, the money that's been given to you to protect the Australian people, to protect all of our citizens, including not just Australians of Jewish descent, but Australians of all backgrounds who've come here. And we have one of the largest Greek populations outside of Greece in Melbourne, and it is unacceptable to have Nazis on the streets of Melbourne as well, throwing Nazi salutes. And I welcome the Victorian government outlawing the Nazi salute today. And I welcome this parliament's move and the government's move to rightly outlaw symbols, hate symbols, and these other Nazi symbols from being produced on the streets of Melbourne. More laws that we need to pass to stop this extremist response. But in spite of these very difficult developments, I know that the support of the Australian people stands steadfastly behind Australia's Jewish community, a peaceful, happy, productive community that have come here and contributed so much to the fabric of Australia. We are behind you. And we don't see any equivalence as a parliament between terror groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and their backers in Iran and the great migration and peaceful migration that Australian Jewish community represents here in Australia. And so I also welcome President Biden, Secretary Blinken, the great response of the United States, still the leader of the free world today and of the West, in ensuring that they have given absolute steadfast support to Israel. Why? Because Israel has a right to exist. Because after the Holocaust, the pogroms, all of the tragedy of the Jewish people throughout history, Israel represents the best chance for the Jewish people to live in peace, the modern state of Israel since 1948. And while Australia continues to support a two-state solution, and we do, and of course the loss of any civilian life is absolutely tragic, the actors that have initiated this recent round of conflict are terror groups, and we should not shy away from that. Hamas and Hezbollah. All of the civilian loss of life that is coming now has been initiated by terrorist actors. And the United States, Australia, the free world stands behind Israel because it is the rational thing to do, because it is the right thing to do, because it respects human rights and international rights. And I'm very proud of Australia for the response that we've had and proud of the government's response as well. And so today I rise with great privilege to be able to say to the Australian Jewish community, we support you. We love you. We know how much you have suffered from this senseless and baseless attack. We do understand very much, and any rational, right-thinking person who examines this conflict understands the hatred that is behind the acts that have happened here, and the indecency and the utter lack of humanity. And if we truly stand on the side of peace, we will always stand behind countries that respect rights, countries that have the rule of law, countries that want freedom and peace. I believe Israel is one of those, and we support you, and I'm very proud to support this motion.